So today we're going to be talking about the Russian Revolution, or aka a giant. It starts with this bastard, the father of communism, Karl Marx himself. He was a German guy from the 1800s who, along with other socialists like Friedrich Engels, created the Communist Manifesto and wrote Das Kapital, one of the evilest books in history. He believed that capitalism divided society and preferred economics over politics. He thought that communism would be achieved through a revolution where the proletariat, the working class people, would overthrow the bourgeoisies, the factory owners. He believed that this revolution would happen naturally. This ideology is fittingly called Marxism. He thought Russia, due to how backwards it was, would be the last place that this revolution would occur. But naturally, it was the first.
So back in 1894, the new Tsar, Emperor of Russia, Nicholas II, came to power. Russia was an autocracy back then, meaning that the ruler, the Tsar, had absolute control of the country. This made him quite unpopular. He was a harsh ruler. The economy of Russia, complete tatters. So what does he do to unite the country? Well, start a war, of course. The Russo-Japanese War of 1904 was a dispute over Manchuria between Russia and Japan. And obviously, big behemoth Russia over here is going to crush this tiny little Japan, right? And no, that didn't happen. Russia lost, which made Nicholas even more unpopular with the people, starting to get upset. And they had things to say to this big Nick guy over here. So on January 22nd, 1905, a group of peaceful protesters, led by the priest Father Gapon, gathered near the Winter Palace, begging the Tsar for help. They were hungry and the wages were poor in this country. So being the swell guy that he is, big old Nicholas handled the situation pretty well, I would say, and made great changes to help the Russian people.
It's the best day I'm so busy, got nothing to do.
Yeah, okay, that didn't quite turn out well. 130 people are dead, hundreds more were injured, and yeah, okay, this Nicholas guy kind of is a bit incompetent, the people were thinking at this time. Even his most loyal supporters were joining counter-revolutionary groups against him. Sorry, Nick, you're in a bit of a pickle here now, aren't you?
So in October, most of the population is on strike. Nicholas creates the October Manifesto, and this gives some civil liberties to the people. He also makes a Duma, an actual democratic parliament, well, except for the part where it mostly consists of paid-off moderates with practically no power whatsoever. Nicholas just arrested the Duma when they made a decision he didn't like and disbanded it if they disagreed with him. Needless to say, Nicholas wasn't good at keeping his promises. Given the light of recent events, I have decided to promise you guys some civil liberties and an elected parliament. I promise this, you guys. I promise. During this time, Soviets were established, where local elected assemblies supplied workers, coordinate strikes in factories. All over Russia, there were mass strikes, with there being a total of 6,000 separate strikes over the span of just 2 years.
So Nicholas needed something big to get it out of this big situation he's got here. Something to unite all of Russia and ease the tension on him. And something big was exactly what Nicholas got. In 1914, World War I began. The country united to fight against Germany. Everybody was happy, and Nicholas's reign was completely fine, right? Yeah, a round of applause. And no, because, it's Russia. You have to expect it at this point, So, although Russia may have had some slight victories at the beginning of the war due to their sheer numbers, they lost quite a lot, amassed huge casualties, and to no one's surprise, this war was beginning to become unpopular. Then Nicholas had the bright idea to become the commander of the armed forces himself. How good, right? Yeah, well, unfortunately, Nicholas must have forgot his brain in St. Petersburg when he went to the war front, because by doing so, all of the losses that the army experienced were being personally associated with him. And yeah, not good. So yeah, thanks, Nick. Things were looking dire for the Russian army. But what was happening back in the capital? Enter Gregory Rasputin, a holy monk from Siberia, with a wicked beard, known for his prophecies, but he actually predicted Russia losing the war, and his actions with the ladies. So, the complete opposite of Silken, basically. When Rasputin's popularity was starting to grow with the people, Tsarina Alexandra brought him to the capital to heal her hemophiliac son and heir to the throne, Alexei. After Rasputin magically healed Alexei, he gained considerable favor with the royal family. So much so, he was actually in charge of the government when the Duma disbanded in 1915 and began to replace qualified, politicians with just homeless friends and followers. Good for him, but too bad the autocrats and princes didn't think the same. November 29th, 1916, Rasputin said his last prayer. Before he died, however, he sent one last prophecy to Tsarina Alexandra. If he died by the hands of the royal family, they would be dead within a year. Was he right? Well, we'll have to see later.
This brings us to the February Revolution of 1917. Well, technically March, but this is Russia, so they still use that old calendar for some reason. Anyways, the people really hated this Nicholas guy now. Like, really hated it.
This guy stinks!
They started mass hunger demonstrations in the capital. Even Cossacks, a military regiment, actually joined them, and because they were starving as well. The army and the Duma told Nicholas that his people didn't support him at all anymore. Nicholas tried to give the throne to his brother, but he was smart enough not to touch that dumpster fire. It was time for Nicholas to step down. After 400 years of Tsarist rule in Russia, Nicholas abdicated on March 15th of 1917. He, along with his family, were placed underneath house arrest.
So before we continue along, let's back it up to 1903. The Social Democratic Labor Party is divided into two sides. The Mensheviks, which meant minority, led by Julius Martov. They were patient and aligned with Marxist views of a natural revolution. The other side was the Bolsheviks, headed by a certain Russian named Vladimir. Well, no, not that one. Vladimir Lenin was his name. The party meant majority, but was actually the minority, and then the Mensheviks were actually the majority. It's Russia, so it's obviously going to be backwards, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, Lenin was a faithful follower of Marx and read Marx's writings as a young adult. However, there was a few key differences in his beliefs. For one, he thought politics was more important than economics, and his ideas seemed more practical since he actually wanted to take over Russia and reshape it according to his communist vision. And as for the natural revolution that Marx believed in, well, Lenin thought it would be a forced and violent one, started by a small group of revolutionaries. This was called, well, take a guess, Leninism. The two groups formally split in 1911, sort of became like arch rivals of each other. Throughout his life, Lenin would be exiled to places like Siberia and its wastelands and other countries numerous times. And Bolshevik operations would be kind of confined in secret from the Tsarist rule. So when a certain Nicholas II stepped down, Lenin saw it as an opportunity to rise up.
Lenin, who was in exile in Germany at the time, was given safe passage to Petrograd by the Germans in hope of stopping the war on the Eastern Front. And when he returned, he gained a lot of favor and recognition in the capital. He wrote his April Theses. He called for immediate revolution, seizures of factories and aristocratic land, and full power to the Soviets and labor movements. This was influential in spreading the message of Lenin and the Bolsheviks. Got it?
Okay, so back to Nicholas II abdicating. To replace the Tsar, a provisional government was established, headed by one Alexander Kerensky, the former Minister of War turned Prime Minister. The provisional government set out to do a few things, such as organizing a constituent assembly to create a new constitution for Russia. Unfortunately for Kerensky, he decided that continuing the war would boost Russian nationalism and support for the provisional government. And this was known as the July or Kerensky Offensive, which was a complete failure and created further dissent among the people. And considering that Russians were completely tired of this war, this was quite possibly the worst thing Kerensky could have done at the time. And oh yeah, he made strikes legal during a time where the people were already quite angry. And I mean, I think you can put two and two together here. During mass strikes in the capital of Petrograd during July, troops opened fire in what came to be known as July Days. Kerensky also arrested Bolsheviks and supporters of Lenin, and Lenin was forced to flee the country once again. Well, this train is just getting started, comrades. Commander of the army, Levar Kornilov, attempted to overthrow Kerensky with the help of the army. Kerensky decides to get help from the Soviets, the Workers' Council, and the Bolsheviks to stop Kornilov. In the end, Kornilov was defeated and arrested. However, for Kerensky, it was too late. The Bolsheviks had gained too much power for the government to stop. Kerensky even tried to cut off Bolshevik telephone lines and newspapers, but it had little to no effect here.
Lenin returned to Petrograd in a big way. He was declaring, "Peace, land, and bread." This may seem like a generic slogan today, but at the time it was everything the Russian people wanted. An end to the war, land for the peasants, and an end to hunger. With the support of the Soviets in Petrograd, and the Bolsheviks becoming more and more popular than ever thanks to the Kornilov affair, Lenin had a one-way ticket to power. The October Revolution had begun. This had Bolsheviks written all over it. Military advisor of Lenin and right-hand man, Leon Trotsky, persuaded him to finally siege the Winter Palace. And that he did. On November 7th, Kerensky had already fled from Russia, and there was little resistance from the remains of the provisional government. Lenin began by finally holding a democratic election that he promised, which he lost, but he kind of just ignored the results. In 1918, he finally ended Russia's involvement in the war by signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Although they gained peace with Germany, they lost 26% of their population after giving up a lot of land and had to pay Germany a hefty sum.
Hey, remember the Romanovs? You know, the royal family. Looks like they're taking a family picture in that basement. How nice. We'll check back on them later.
Not too long after the Russian Civil War begins. Well, because it can't be Russia without another war going on. The Mensheviks and the royal troops called the White Army attacked Lenin and his Red Army from all sides. Even Allied countries helped the Whites as they wanted a new government that would help with the war against Germany. The Reds, however, controlled the industrial heartland of Russia, which allowed them access to the railway resources. The Whites were unfortunately quite disorganized, and sometimes they even fought amongst themselves. On top of this, the Reds and Lenin had the Cheka, which were a secret police that kind of just beat and killed anyone Lenin thought was a traitor. Lenin also created the economic policy called war communism, where surplus crops were seized from peasants and given to the Red Army. All of these things helped keep the Red Army going, and they eventually won the Civil War. However, it devastated the peasants, with many killed from hunger and by the Cheka, a period known as the Red Terror.
Hey, let's check back on the royal family. I wonder how that picture turned out. Oh. Well, it seems that during the Civil War, Lenin and the Bolsheviks were kind of scared that if the White Army freed Nicholas, it would become a problem for their new government, so they murdered the entire royal family. After the Civil War, Lenin replaced war communism with a new economic policy, which was a hybrid of socialism and capitalism. People gave a percentage of crops to the government, but were still able to sell the remaining crops, which helped the economy and agriculture grow. The Bolsheviks would call themselves the Communist Party in 1918, and Russia became the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics in 1922, the USSR. All is great for Lenin now. I think it's going completely fine. I guess kind of should mention the part where he suffered multiple strokes and kind of died in 1924. But it's probably fine.
Lenin's last wish before he died was that Joseph Stalin, the secretary of the Communist Party, be the absolute last person to gain power. So of course, Stalin was the first one to gain power. There was a power struggle between Trotsky and Stalin for leadership, but in the end, Trotsky was deported and Stalin took absolute control of Russia in 1927, establishing a totalitarian state.
And well, folks, that's it. That's the Russian Revolution. Nothing bad ever happened after this.
Cold War.
Stalin was a nice guy. Nobody else died.
Vietnam.
And this was a completely
Korea.
fine thing. Nothing bad. Yay, Russia. Nothing. Russia is doing nothing wrong, especially right now.
Ukraine. Years of factories and aristocratic land. Aristocratic land. She's of factories and aristocratic land and
Aristocrat.
okay.
Okay, that didn't quite turn out how the
Message of the Lenin and Bolsheviks. This was influential. This was influential in spreading the message of Lenin and the Bolsheviks. This was influential in spreading the message of Lenin and the Bolsheviks. Got it? Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Treaty of Brest-Litovsk.
Wait.
Litovsk.
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 No, Litovsk.
Litovsk.
Okay, close enough.